Hello and welcome to the Odds On Favorites podcast, where we're talking sports entertainment all with an eye on the bottom line. I'm Drew Goldfarb, joined by Rick Rockwell and Taylor Smith. As always, let's jump right in, guys, with news and notes. We're taking a closer look at some of the biggest news of the week, and in this case, the month, because we're starting with the NBA. Free agency is basically behind us, with plenty of big names making their moves to new homes. We begin in the Eastern Conference, where the reigning NBA champions lost a key component to free agency, as Kawhi Leonard left the Toronto Raptors to sign with his hometown Los Angeles Clippers. That leaves the Milwaukee Bucks as the betting favorites at plus 500 to win the title in the NBA in 2020. Rick, should the Bucks be favored after they stood still this offseason, or has another team in their conference passed them by?
You know, I'm actually kind of surprised that their odds are that high, considering they did not do as much to improve as Philadelphia did. I thought Philadelphia did, even though they traded Butler, they signed Al Horford, and I think he's going to be a huge difference maker. I think defensively they're going to be better. I think they'll be better in the half-court game. Like, they have more depth with him. They have more veteran leadership with him. I think it opens up their team more than having Butler did. I don't think the Butler experiment worked out too well. I think that's pretty safe to say. I like Philadelphia more than I like Milwaukee. If I were to pick someone right now, I would pick the 76ers. I don't think Milwaukee has done much other than re-sign some of their key free agents. And with that said, when you compare their roster to the 76ers, Philly's the only one that looks like they've improved in the East, other than maybe Miami Heat. And that would be my, I don't know if I would call him a dark horse, but especially if they get Westbrook, they're the odds-on favorite right now to trade for him. If they get him, they could easily be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. Let's be honest here. The Eastern Conference isn't a great conference. You know, they just shifted all the power. I mean, for Leonard to go to the Western Conference, or come back to the Western Conference, I should say, the Eastern Conference is – I don't want to, say they're irrelevant, but other than a few teams, I mean, honestly, my Sacramento Kings could win that conference, okay? So, no, I'm not with Milwaukee. I'm not picking Milwaukee. I like some of their players, but Philly is my pick.
Before Taylor jumps in, I want to point out that Rick made sure he was wearing that shirt minutes before the podcast started recording, I think just so he could make that point that the Kings would win the Eastern Conference. Taylor, go ahead.
Yeah, Philly, I don't really know what to make of them. I do like the moves they made. I think because Al Horford was the best center defensively against Joel Embiid, I think having them on the same team obviously is good for Philly. Josh Richardson, I think, was also nice getting that Jimmy Butler trade, but losing J.J. Redick hurts. I'm not sure they have enough shooting to get by. I think the Milwaukee Bucks title odds are so low just because the East is so shallow. Like, it's either going to be them or Philly, and then after that in the finals you've got Brooklyn, who we don't really know. Like, Kevin Durant might come back, he might not. He's probably not coming back, which I think is reflected in the odds. But Brooklyn's the other team there that is a viable bet as a long shot, just for the chance that he does return at some point. Boston, that's a wild card team. Indiana's a team I like at plus 1,600 just to win the East. I think just because there's such a lack of depth, that team's going to be top 4 almost by default. So I get why Milwaukee is where they are. I do like Philly, though, just for the value. They're pretty much neck and neck to begin with. Philly almost took down Toronto in the playoffs. They're a year older. They're a young team in general. Milwaukee could be in for a letdown after they kind of shocked the world last season. They're not going to be sneaking up on anybody again. So Milwaukee's a little bit overvalued. I think Philly's a little undervalued. They should be more even. And I think as the season goes on, they will be.
Yeah, and the one thing I always like to say when it comes to free agency in the offseason is the team that stands pat is a team that's moving backwards, because every team around them is making a move to get a little bit better at the very least. And if every team around you gets a little bit better, that means that the goal line has moved. So the team that was, way up there but doesn't move from year to year, every other team has taken a step. So I still think when you've got the league MVP, you've got to be at least considered one of the favorites. I agree with both of you. I mean, the Sixers was a team that I really liked last year in the playoffs, and had it not been for a crazy bounce at the buzzer. We could have been talking about the Sixers playing the Bucks in the conference finals last year, and who knows from there. Or at the very least, that game would have gone to overtime. But, they are a team that has replaced a few key pieces, but they've brought in some key pieces. So I do like the Sixers too. If Kevin Durant is able to return to Kevin Durant form by the second round of the playoffs, I don't care if he doesn't play a regular season game. If he can warm up in round one, because that's all the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs ever are for the teams that are actually in contention, and play in the second round, then the Nets have to be considered a team to reckon with in the postseason. But as we sit right now, if Durant does miss the entire year, then I think for me it comes down to Milwaukee and the Sixers, and I would take the team that gives you the better odds, especially when they made moves and Milwaukee did not. Indiana is an interesting one. Taylor and I had broken that one down. The Pacers could be that nice little long shot candidate to win the Eastern Conference, especially when you've only got 4-5 teams that could even legitimately advance to the conference finals.
Four
right
now. I think it's 4.
Right.
Unless Brooklyn is the thing.
Right, unless Brooklyn.
Yeah, you got Boston, Indiana, Philly, and Milwaukee. Maybe Toronto, but I don't think so.
Yeah, basically, if you want to bet for all 4 of those teams to make the second round of the playoffs, if you can find that. not just making the playoffs, but they'll run through whomever, unless the Nets get healthy enough to be able to play. But, yeah, so it's I don't mind the Pacers because the Bucks are beatable if they get to that point, and they're the same team as last year, and that last year's team, as good as they were not good enough to get to the NBA Finals. So we'll see as every team around them's got a bit better. But let's go to the Western Conference now. The 5-time reigning Western Conference champions are no longer favored to win the West after losing Kevin Durant to Brooklyn, losing DeMarcus Cousins and Quinn Cook to the Los Angeles Lakers, trading Andre Iguodala to Memphis, and losing Klay Thompson for at least most, if not all, of the season due to injury. The Los Angeles Lakers, meanwhile, have added those pieces that I mentioned from Golden State, as well as Anthony Davis, while the LA Clippers brought in both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Clippers plus 270 odds to win the NBA championship in 2020. Lakers currently betting at plus 350. Taylor, do you see any team from outside of LA challenging the Lakers and the Clippers as the new best in the West?
Yes, just because it's going to take both LA teams time to gel. These are largely new rosters. They got some holdovers. The Clippers have the same coaching staff and all that, but the Lakers have a new coach plus all these new guys. LeBron and Anthony Davis have never played together. I imagine they'll fit nicely together, but it's not going to happen right away. And just the West is so much more stacked from 3 to 8 than the East is. You got Utah, who looks much better. They added Mike Conley, which is huge. Bojan Bogdanovic, Ed Davis, a nice piece off the bench potentially. The Nuggets, that's one of those teams that kind of has stood pat, but they were so good last year. You could say that the other teams may have moved past them, but I still think it would be a surprise if they didn't finish top 5 in the conference. So I'm seeing Denver at plus 1,000 just to win the West. I don't love that, but that's pretty awesome value for a team that I think finished number 2. The Rockets, another team that's largely stood pat. They've been the biggest threat to Golden State the last few years. And then you still have Golden State, whatever's left of them. You still have San Antonio. Portland was a Western Conference Finals team. Sacramento's improved. Dallas has improved. New Orleans looks deep. The West is just so stacked that I don't see how you can love either LA team, especially at their current odds. Plus 270 and I think plus 350, you said, for the Lakers.
Yep.
I don't
That's
love
to win
that.
the NBA championship.
Win the NBA title, not even to win the conference. The Clippers are plus 180 to win the West. The Lakers are plus 200. So it's I still like them, obviously. They look the best on paper, and eventually the cream may rise to the top. But I'd wait for the odds to come down, which I think they will as the year goes on. There's a chance neither gets a top 2 seed, just because if they do get off to slow starts, these other teams that are more familiar have a chance to get off to a good start and rise to the top. So, seeding matters in the playoffs, and I wouldn't bet on those teams at the current odds.
I agree with your point on the current odds. I think it's a little premature to jump on them. With that said, though, the NBA title's coming through California again. And it's
Sacramento?
I wish. Listen, it's going to be – well, Taylor just you sized it all up. It's going to be a dogfight just to make the playoffs. And then you get into the playoffs, and it's going to be chaotic. Like, the best teams other than Philly and Milwaukee are all in the West. So at least 8 of the top 10 teams are in the West. And it's going to be insane. I mean, Sacramento has their best roster since the days of Weber and Divac. And they're still going to have to fight to make the playoffs. That's how stacked this is. But honestly, we just saw what Leonard did going to Toronto. Another conference, a whole nother roster, not even playing in his hometown or anywhere near where he grew up, and playing in another country. And dude led that team to an NBA title. Now he gets Paul George to join him with the Clippers, who, correct me if I'm wrong, were a playoff team last year without him, have relatively most of the same roster that they had last year because they traded more draft picks than anything to get Paul George. Like you mentioned, the same coaching staff and stuff. The Lakers might have the better duo of Davis and LeBron, but Clippers by far have the better team. They got more depth. They got better talent from 3 on down to 8 on their roster. Where the Lakers, we don't even know who their number 3 is going to be, let alone 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, Boogie, if he's healthy, he will help that team a lot. But we saw what happened to him in the playoffs. He wasn't healthy for most of the year last year. Then he gets hurt in the playoffs, and he had a chance to really shine in the finals, and he wasn't able to. He just did not have it. And there's no guarantee he's going to get it back. Playing alongside Davis will probably be a comfort for him, having that kind of dynamic big man down there with him. But the Lakers are still – I wouldn't even put the Lakers up that high. Like, I would put them down closer to 8th in the West. The Nuggets are a very talented and deep team. Utah got better. Portland got better. I believe all 3 of those teams are better than the Lakers right now. Like, I think they're just it's the case of it's all exciting that all this stuff's happening for the Lakers. It's that exciting news, the new pieces. Oh, it's going to be amazing that these guys are playing together. But when reality hits and we're at trade deadline and the Lakers are just above 500 and people are going to realize, well, maybe they weren't as great as everybody hyped them up to be in the summer when the moves were made. But with the Clippers, they're going to do it the right way. They have a lot of talent, and then they got 2 guys, 2 star players who also play defense, okay? And that's going to be the key. Kawhi is arguably the best 2-way player in the game, and we've seen what Paul George has done these last couple of years with a team that wasn't as talented as what they have now with the Clippers. I'm not excited to say that the Clippers could win it all. You know, obviously I want my Kings to win it all. But the talent they have, and with Leonard coming there, and having a sidekick like Paul George and the rest of the young roster they had and the coaching staff, oh, man, if there's any team I was going to bet on right now, besides my Kings, it would be the Clippers.
Plus, one thing worth noting about the Lakers is that LeBron, I think, is 34, going on 35. He just suffered his first long-term injury of his career. And Anthony Davis has cracked 70 games twice in his first 6 or 7 seasons.
Yeah.
He's not exactly Iron Man out there. So
nope.
Either of them goes down for a while, this team could just plummet down the standings.
Yep.
Right, well, we saw that with the Lakers last year, that they were at least a decent to good team when LeBron was healthy, and then he got hurt initially, and basically that was the end of everything for the Lakers. I think that the hill to climb to get to that true NBA championship contender was smaller, or at least the Clippers started higher up the hill than the Lakers did by far, despite the Lakers having LeBron James, best player in basketball. The Clippers, I think, those odds are just not worth a wager 9-10 months away from that paying out. I'm not taking that on any team. I wouldn't have taken that on Golden State in the last couple of years that far out, because you just don't know. The health issues and concerns for the Lakers are real. The changing of the coaching staff with the dramatic change of the roster does create concern. The Clippers obviously just have to make sure that they gel a little bit. And mentioning that Leonard went to his hometown team, that's why a lot of people thought the Philadelphia Phillies were, basically, what do you call it? Bryce Harper, not from Philadelphia, but wanted to find a home to be in. And that didn't exactly work out for the Phillies at this point. But he's obviously a Vegas kid. But the Clippers are, I think, the more intriguing of the two, despite having the shorter odds. Wouldn't take either of them. I agree with Taylor, as we've talked about, the Utah Jazz making a lot of moves are very interesting going into this year as a potential, surprise team. The Denver Nuggets had the best home record in the NBA last year, and if you're going to consider Milwaukee, you've got to consider Denver because they were really close. They were, I think, a game back of Golden State in the overall standings, seeding-wise. They were a game away from being the number one seed. Houston, basically if Golden State's no longer a real issue for them, that's been what's kept the Rockets grounded in the playoffs for the last number of years. So there are a lot of teams that you could look at that are all reasons that betting on the Clippers or the Lakers right now is not a smart move financially. It's also the point was made that I think by Taylor that if they don't gel immediately, you're probably going to get twice as good odds for either of these teams November 1st, when the teams might be 5-5 or 6-4 or 4-6. The odds are going to shift. So as long as they don't get off to an 8-2 start, you're going to see better odds in a few months when they are going through the growing pains of coming together as a team. I think that the thing is that if the Clippers or the Lakers were playing the Eastern Conference and they had these odds, I'd be much more comfortable taking them because you go, 50-50 shot they make the NBA Finals at the very least. And then if they've gelled playing 100 games together, they'll have a really good chance at winning the title. Here, even being the 3 seed, you could end up with an incredibly challenging road to a championship. And if they don't gel immediately or by game 5 or 10, it would become increasingly unlikely that either would get a top 2 seed. And if you are not the number 1 seed and playing the 8 seed and then playing the 4 seed, you're not going to be in as easy as it's going to get anyway in the West, position to get to the NBA Finals. So I think the biggest thing for me is that there are too many teams that are worth a glance in the Western Conference to even consider taking a team at less than a 4-1 payout to win the NBA championship, much less a team that hasn't yet played together, even remotely played together to this point.
Who are you picking to win then? Betting odds aside, who are you picking to win the title?
If I'm picking a team right now, I'm probably going Denver because I think they're the safest play. We've seen what they can do. Okay. If I'm picking a long shot candidate, I'm picking the Jazz because I'd be interested to see what they can do. And I think the Clippers are the much more obvious team out of California.
What about you, Taylor?
Yeah, the Clippers, they do have more continuity, like you said, than the Lakers. They are a fairly decent pick. It's just the odds. Like if they all had plus 500 odds, I'd take the Clippers, but yeah, it's kind of about value at this point. And right now I wouldn't take that, but you can probably get them at plus 500 a few weeks into the season. So it's just a waiting game. I would still pick the Clippers odds aside,
Because of Kawhi. Who is the best player in the game? Not LeBron anymore.
So who are you taking? Are you taking the Sacramento Kings?
I'm taking the Clippers.
Taking the Clippers. Okay.
Yes.
So basically we're all in agreement that if the Clippers can get together, they will win the NBA championship in 2020.
Yeah.
But as Taylor said, I would not place a bet on them until November 1st at the earliest. If I'm placing a bet now, I'm looking for value because you're 10 months out. So I'm looking at Denver or I'm looking at Utah. But November 1st, I would take the Clippers. And for even more on the NBA, make sure to check out Taylor and my video wrapping up free agency, which you can find right here on the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel. But right now, let's talk about Wimbledon. Men's semifinals taking place just about 14 hours from when we're recording this podcast, with the finals coming up Sunday morning. Top 3 seeds still remain. Novak Djokovic on one side of the bracket, Rafa Nadal taking Roger Federer on the other side. Rick, what matchup do you expect to see Sunday morning, and who is your pick to win the tournament with the 4 competitors that are still in it?
The men's side has pretty much gone the way we expected, the way most people have expected. When we did our Wimbledon breakdown video, and even when we talked about it on the podcast before, I mean, it all came down to Djokovic. And then we were hoping to see, the big three in the semifinals. To see Nadal and Federer play against each other is going to be nostalgic based on how long their rivalry has lasted. Federer has gotten the better of Nadal at Wimbledon. Nadal has gotten the better of Federer at most other places, especially the French Open. So he has the head-to-head record in Grand Slams. Nadal has more wins. But that said, though, Federer's looking good. He's looking solid on grass this year. If it wasn't for Djokovic, if that was the finals, I'd be picking Federer to win. But there's no doubt that the jokester is going to win this. He's in his prime when Nadal and Federer are both on the downside of their primes. Djokovic will win. I'm still hoping Federer will beat Nadal. I like Federer a lot more than I like Nadal. Nothing against Nadal. He's a great player. But I think it'll be Djokovic, Federer, and Djokovic will win in probably maybe 4 sets, if not sweep it.
Bold prediction.
Yeah, it's hard to go against Djokovic. I mean, he's got the easier semifinal matchup. Federer and Nadal are probably going to kill each other in the semis.
Yep.
It's kind of shocking they haven't met in this tournament since 2008 when they played that insane 5-set match that went on forever. Some say the greatest match ever played. But I think it'll be Djokovic and Federer as well. Federer is 2-1 all time against Nadal at Wimbledon. Just Djokovic has a breezier path. He's a minus favorite, which I don't love, but you can take a shot on Federer or Nadal. They're pretty similar. Plus 300 for Nadal to win it all. Plus 350 for Federer. But I'd still go with Djokovic just because it seems like fait accompli at this point. Easier road means he should be more well rested.
I'm just going to make it unanimous. It's got to be Djokovic. He's got to be the one that you can, as we're sitting here now, basically go, he's in the finals. And I would imagine he's playing Federer, and I would take Djokovic to win that. He's the best in the world at the moment. So can't really go against it, especially when, as Taylor said, it's very likely Federer and Nadal beat each other up a little bit in the semis, which leaves Djokovic a little bit more fresh for the finals. And I think that whoever's playing Djokovic at any point in a tournament like Wimbledon has to be 100% fresh to really stand a chance. So make it unanimous, even for the matchup, Djokovic over Federer in the men's finals. On the women's side, we saw 7-seed Simona Halep advance to the finals earlier in the morning of our taping. 11-seed Serena Williams advanced shortly after that as well. Serena, the betting favorite for the finals at minus 208 on the money line. Halep at plus 152. Taylor, it's been a crazy Wimbledon on the women's side. How do you see this tournament ending?
Yeah, it's hard to bet against Serena at any point. Whenever she's rolling like this, she's kind of a lock. She's 9-1 all time against Halep. Halep's 10 years younger, but Serena's Serena. She's the greatest women's tennis player of all time, maybe the greatest anything tennis player of all time. It was cool to see Coco Gauff, I think is how you pronounce her name, the 15-year-old make a run there for a while, but Serena's found her rhythm. The field's kind of watered down. Halep is a good matchup for her, but she's just been so dominant head-to-head against her. I can't fathom betting against Serena here.
Before the tournament started, and you can go back and check the tape, pretty much my whole point with Serena was if she's healthy, 100% healthy, she's going to win it. Unfortunately, she hasn't been 100% healthy this year going into last year, and she pulled out of more tournaments than she did completing them. So coming into Wimbledon, not being fully healthy, being in the toughest draw, or the toughest quarter of the entire women's Wimbledon tournament, nobody, her odds after the draw went up because nobody thought she was going to get past people like Kerber or Barty, who were also in that quarter. And seeing her win slowly, one by one by one. Now, she hasn't played some of the best because some of the best choked before they met her. And unfortunately, I think Halep will choke in this one as well. She's lost more finals than she's won in Grand Slams. And she's never won a Wimbledon Grand Slam tournament before. Serena is a big game player. She's a champion. She's a proven champion. And she knows what it takes to win on any surface in the final of a Grand Slam tournament. So even at less than 100% healthy, she's proved that she is the best right now. And, it's frustrating because it's so easy just to say, I'm taking Serena to win because she's the best player. But when she's not healthy, you can't realistically say, well, she's the best player, so I got to take her. Because she's not healthy and she's not playing the best out of everybody. And she was ranked 11th, right? So it's not like she's tearing it up. With that said, Serena's going to take this. She's going to overpower her opponent. I don't even know if Halep is going to even win a set. It's going to be a dominant performance by Serena. She's going to add to her stats as being arguably the greatest female tennis player of all time. I wouldn't put her as the greatest of all time just yet in both genders. I think that still goes towards Federer right now. With that said, it's Serena. It's all Serena.
Yeah, you don't bet against Tom Brady once he makes it to a Super Bowl. You don't bet against Serena Williams once she gets to a Grand Slam final.
Exactly.
It's, if you wanted to think she might, the injury concerns like you brought up, Rick. I mean, yeah, early on, the draw, everything, the first few rounds, whatever. But once she gets to a final,
exactly,
that's it. There is she's proven that she can get to that point. There's nothing that says that she can't win one more.
They shouldn't even play it because that's how confident I am in her winning.
Well, hopefully for your sake she does, because otherwise we're going to have to move whoops to the beginning of next week's podcast because But right now, let's go to Give Me Props. We're looking at some prop bets that caught our eye this week. We'll begin in the NFL. Already counting down the start of the 2019 season. We're looking at plenty of prop bets between now and then. Taylor wrote an article online at gamblingsites.org recently about the prop bet on which quarterback will lead the NFL in passing yards this coming season. 1 year after finishing second in the league, Patrick Mahomes is one of three QBs listed at plus 400 odds as the favorites on this bet. Others tied with him, Matt Ryan and Andrew Luck. Last year's yardage leader, Ben Roethlisberger, listing at plus 750. Rick, can last year's league MVP overtake Roethlisberger, or does another quarterback catch your eye?
Oh, he can easily overtake Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger lost his best receiver, his top weapon, in Antonio Brown. Roethlisberger is not even going to, in my opinion, he won't be in the top 5 in passing yards this season. But with Mahomes, he still has the same offense. They don't have that dominant running back, even though Williams came on strong and looked great in the playoffs. And, was a steal for them getting him. And they gave him a contract extension. And they picked up another running back to add to the depth. But they're not a run-first team anymore. They're a pass-first team. They'll dink and dunk. They're going back to the old West Coast offense system where instead of running the ball, they'll take a 3 or 4 yard dump-off pass. And that's how they're moving the chains. A couple of those, you easily get a first down. Mahomes is a stud. I mean, we all can agree he's a stud. He's going to throw the ball all over the place. The only player that I think can really give him a run this year would be Andrew Luck because he's in a pass-happy offense also. They did improve getting more depth at running back. With that said, though, they're still an Andrew Luck team. Everything goes through him. And now the Chiefs' offense, they're still a Patrick Mahomes team, a Patrick Mahomes offense. With that said, you're going to want them – you're going to count on them to move the chains. You're going to count on them to win the games. And they're going to put up a lot of yards. It's got to be Mahomes. I can't imagine him not leading the NFL in passing touchdowns and in passing yards and possibly winning the NFL MVP again, unless my boy Saquon Barkley can tear it up for the Giants this year.
The only thing about Mahomes is that there's an unfortunate and uncertain situation with Tyreek Hill. There's a chance he gets suspended for who knows how long, and obviously that's probably the biggest deep threat in the game, and that's a huge part of that offense, and if he's gone, I'm not sure who's stepping into that void. So Mahomes at plus 400 is fine. I'm surprised he didn't lead the league last season. Roethlisberger, I'm with you. I don't think he will finish near the top 5 necessarily. I like Matt Ryan, though, same odds, plus 400. Consistent offense. He's got the same guys coming back. He's still got Julio. He's still got Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu. Devontae Freeman's a nice pass catcher out of the backfield. I think that's an offense that should be fine. There's no reason to think they won't put up points. The defense is enough of a question mark to where I think they should still have to throw throughout most of their games, which is a factor. So Ryan at plus 400 is fine. If you want a long shot, I like Jared Goff. He's way down at plus 1,600. He finished 5th last season. I'm not too bullish on the Rams in general like I was last year, but he's still got Brandon Cooks. He's still got Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp's coming back. So they should be fine. I think plus 1,600. He's a little bit undervalued. Same with Phillip Rivers at plus 2,000. Same deal there. They lost Benjamin to the Raiders, but he's still got Mike Williams as a red zone target. Keenan Allen's probably the best possession receiver in the game. So plus 2,000 for Rivers, I think is fine. It's also worth noting he hasn't missed a game since 2005. So if you want a guy that's probably playing all 16 games, that doesn't hurt. So I like Mahomes. I like Ryan, same odds. But if you want a long shot, Goff and Rivers, I think makes sense.
I agree with Taylor on it. I think that there are fewer question marks surrounding Matt Ryan in that case. There's also more of a track record to show that what you can kind of expect from him at the NFL level. And yeah, I mean, I also like the Goff pick too, because, if the Rams are, as good offensively as they were last year, if they, can repeat that, it's Goff's an intriguing pick, especially with odds that are not as the betting favorite, the odds-on favorites for it. So I might lean towards Ryan just because of the situation that's going on in Kansas City with Mahomes' number one target. So I might then just lean towards Ryan as a slightly safer one if you're going to pick one of the favorites. Luck is an interesting choice with Indy too, because that offense still is still built around Andrew Luck. Two major wrestling shows this weekend we want to touch on very quickly. All Elite Wrestling runs Fight for the Fallen Saturday. WWE goes with Extreme Rules on Sunday. One prop bet, really random, really intriguing, is the plus 3,300 odds that Brock Lesnar leaves the Extreme Rules pay-per-view on Sunday as both the Universal Champion and the Raw Women's Champion. Both of those titles are up for grabs in a mixed-gender tag team match. One match, 2 titles. Brock Lesnar theoretically could cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase to enter himself into that match. Rick and I are going to be chatting about this on the payoff too, but this one was just too good to not hear Taylor try and wrap his head around this concept. So, Taylor, what are you thinking? Can Brock Lesnar become Raw Women's Champion and Universal Champion on Sunday?
I tried to do some research on this because I'm the non-wrestling aficionado on the show, and everything I read just went flying over my head. Like, I know who Brock Lesnar is. I'm aware of that human, but the Money in the Bank thing makes no sense to me. I have no clue what that means. I guess if there are odds on him becoming both the Universal Champion and Raw Women's Champion, it technically can happen. So, sure, if you want to take a crazy bet at plus 3,300, I guess you can do it.
So the brief explanation what the briefcase is that the winner and the holder of that item, technically it basically acts as a contract for an instantaneous, at request of the holder, championship match. So he can cash in on the Universal Champion at any time in the middle of a match, pre-match, post-match. The dude could be sleeping technically, and he could cash in for a match. So because Seth Rollins, the Universal Champion, is in a mixed tag team match for his championship and his real-life girlfriend Becky Lynch's Raw Women's Championship, theoretically Lesnar could cash in on Rollins, enter that match as a third component, and if he wins, the winner takes all in that match, which theoretically would also make him Raw Women's Champion.
Sure thing.
I just kind of want to see Taylor's head either explode or melt with that one. Rick and I are going to talk about that more at length. Check out the payoff on the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel for more on that. It's that time of the podcast, yada, yada, yada. Show me the money! Lines where we look ahead of this weekend's games and events and their current money lines. We begin with UFC, where Fight Night hails from Sacramento, California this weekend. In the main event, Aspen Ladd against Jermaine De Randamie. Did I say that right, Rick?
Sounds about right. It's better than I can say it.
All right. Lad favorite at minus 170, the underdog at plus 140. Rick, how do you see this one playing out?
Listen, if there's any – well, first of all, I'm obviously going with Uriah Faber to win and Emmett to win because they both hail from Sacramento. But
You're getting ahead of us here. That's the next topic.
Okay. But if you take my biases aside, GDR, that's what I call her because I can't pronounce her last name. She's a former champ. She's got legit striking skills in both her fists and her feet. Lad is more of a grappler. So you got the grappler versus striker matchup here. I feel like they overvalue Lad some. I think GDR is worth a flyer. I think she has a chance at pulling off the upset. She's got the experience. She's fought in bigger fights. The one concern with her, let's get that out of the way, is she hasn't been as active as much, like 4 fights in the last 5 years, I think it is. And then she had the whole controversy of getting stripped from the title because she was inactive. And then she had injuries, which also set her back a little bit. But when she's at the top of her game, she is an intense, deadly striker who can win this fight. Lad is a lot younger. She's only had 8 fights. She's never fought anybody of this caliber as of yet. And if you look over her resume, I don't believe she's fought anybody of this caliber yet. She has to get her opponent down to the mat to actually have a shot at winning. If it stays up, she's going to get knocked out. The fight's going to be stopped because she does not have the striking skills to hang, and GDR does not have the grappling skills to hang with Lad. So I'm leaning towards Lad to be able to take her down because I don't feel that GDR has the greatest of takedown defenses. But the odds, there is potential upset here. So if you want to take a flyer on there's not a lot of fights that offer the potential upsets, and this one is the main event, and you're talking about a former champ who didn't lose her title, she was just stripped from it. You got a lot of ingredients here for an upset, and I'm not going to be surprised if there is upset. I tend to lean towards the grappler a little bit in this one, but yeah, you have a good shot here for the upset.
Yeah, a lot of the odds we talk about with fights are pretty lopsided, and this is one of the ones that isn't, which is like what Rick was saying. There's pretty good value on de Randamie, which I assume is the correct pronunciation. But if Lad can get her on the ground, I think this is pretty much over. The 11-year gap is meaningful. Lad's 24, de Randamie's 35. Like you said, de Randamie has not fought much lately. Not that Lad has a ton of experience either, but just that kind of thing matters. If you haven't fought and you're advancing in age, that's something that comes back to haunt you, I imagine. So Lad at minus 170 makes sense. But if you want to take the upset pick, plus 140, the odds are pretty decent. So it's not a toss-up, but I think there's merit in taking de Randamie just because the odds are not too dramatically favoring Lad.
I mean, I can't really argue with that logic. It's for either of you. The age gap does obviously favor the favorite Lad, but GDR is has had a great career, and there's nothing that necessarily says that she couldn't compete. And if the odds are that close, it's you don't as Taylor said. When I'm looking at this, I was like, I don't know. I can't recall seeing a main event or co-main event really for MMA where the odds were kind of this tight. So although I say that, and if we go back a week, I'm sure something at UFC, the pay-per-view was really close too. So I would also agree, Lad, and also would agree with there's nothing wrong with taking the underdog in a situation like this, given her track record. Perhaps the biggest name to casual fans of the sport, at least, is fighting in the match before that one, as Uriah Faber faces Ricky Simon in the co-main event. Simon, the heavy favorite at minus 350, Faber plus 275. Taylor, can the 40-year-old Faber pull the upset on his 26-year-old opponent? We know which direction Rick's going because he jumped the gun on this one. So he's picking Faber because he's a Sacramento, Northern California guy. So your thoughts on this fight?
Not to be ageist, but this is a pretty huge age gap. 14 years is pretty substantial. Faber may have been training for a while for this, but I don't know if he has the quickness to keep up with Simon. I like the value, obviously, on Faber. I'm sure Rick will make a good case for that. Hopefully, aside from just being from Sacramento, but I'm going to take the younger guy. He's going to control the tempo of the match, so I'll take Simon. I wouldn't bet on it because minus 350, you're not making any money on that, but just the more likely result is Simon winning. IMO.
Sacktown is going to show out for Faber. Look, I've been to several Faber fights here in Sacramento, and other than the Kings, he's like the most celebrated athlete here in the city. And it's exciting. And to have him come back after being out for almost 3 years or so, end of 2016 is when he retired, and he goes on the Hall of Fame in 2017. Though he did compete in a grappling tournament a couple months ago overseas, he does train in one of the best MMA gyms in the entire world. Team Alpha Male has legit competitors in every division that they're in, championship contenders. So he even said in a recent interview, he's like, if I wasn't even able to hang with these guys, I wouldn't even come back. Not only that, he's never taken, like, other than the Aldo fight where Aldo, like, chopped his legs out, he hasn't taken the beating. And he even pointed this out, too. His fight style, he doesn't take the beating that some of these other guys do. So he doesn't have that same type of tread on the tires that maybe other 40-year-olds might have. With that said, obviously the odds, you can get a great return if he wins, which he should win. Simon is going to try and take him down to the mat and try and get a tap out. Faber theoretically should still have the advantage in striking, which I think is going to play into his favor. I'm going with the upset here, obviously. I got to represent the 916, represent Sacktown. I'm taking Faber to win. We're going to be partying Saturday night when he does.
The 916, is that Diego San? It's like reversed San Diego?
No, Sacramento.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I'm not familiar with the area code there. I've heard of San Diego's, obviously, or the 305 or the 212, but good to know on that one. I think that it's, Rick, you're our MMA expert, although you've also, as we saw a week ago, very willing to grant victories for someone who either shouts out your hometown or like a NASCAR driver you like. So I would tend to side with Taylor on it that the best bet on this fight is no bet. I could see why, with your argument for Faber, why putting a small wager on him might make some sense. And if someone was looking to throw a few bucks at it and see, I wouldn't, stop him. Uriah Faber, there's a reason that even casual fighting fans know who he is. But yeah, I'm kind of in the team no bet for this one, or really, really small flyer bet just to see, because plus 275 is nice, but I'd be betting enough to get dinner, not enough to get a car payment. That's kind of would be my thought on that. Bellator 224, Bud versus Rubin is Friday night. Let's take a look at the main event here for this one. Julia Budd defending her featherweight world championship against 6-0 challenger Olga Rubin. Budd favored at minus 280 to retain. Rubin plus 200 underdog. Any chance we see a title change Friday night in Oklahoma, Rick?
There's a very, very small chance because Rubin has some serious striking skills, but Budd is the best female fighter outside of the UFC. She's one of the, very least, I would say, top 5 female fighters in the world. Her only 2 losses was to Ronda Rousey in Rousey's prime, or at the beginning of her prime, her run, and Amanda Nunes. So you're talking about 2 of the greatest female fighters of all time. That's her 2 losses. She's been wanting to fight Cyborg. She's hoping that Cyborg will come over to Bellator after her contract's up with UFC. She's got the grappling skills. She's got the strength. She's got the power. She's jacked. She can strike. She can fight on the mat. She's going to win this fight. She's going to show why she's one of the best female fighters. It's in that regard, like, this is the 3rd fight for her where she's in the main event because she's that talented. Unfortunately, Bellator isn't as big as UFC, so you don't get to know some of these fighters as well as you do for the UFC fighters, especially in the women's division, which isn't as, or hasn't been as popular in the past, although women like Nunes is changing the game. For me, though, I'm more intrigued with some of the undercard fights than I am with the main event because I think that's more of a foregone conclusion. It's only a 4-fight main card, so it's not like you have a lot of options there, and some of the matchups are this isn't one of the strongest Bellator cards, but they are going to showcase some of their top fighters, with Bud being one of them. So she's going to win. Like, I'm honestly surprised the odds aren't higher, to be honest.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a little bit of value in taking the underdog here, Ruben, but Bud's on a 10-fight win streak, like you wrote the other day. 5 of those via stoppage. He's just been unstoppable. Minus 280, it's kind of the same thing we're just talking about. There's not much value in taking that. If you want to take a small flyer on Ruben, I guess you can, but I think Rick made a pretty compelling case just to take Bud to win and probably not even bother wagering on it.
Yeah, I'd be more inclined to bet on Faber to pull the upset than to bet on this one. For an upset pick, I mean, Bud is a fantastic fighter, and listening to Rick talk about her for a bit solidifies that even more in my mind on it. I would either take her or just not bet if you don't think that those odds are something that you consider. With if you're betting on MMA, most of the time you're going to kind of see those types of odds a lot anyway, so you might be more inclined to bet on someone whose odds are sitting where they are at where were we at with this one? Minus 280, close to minus 300. So
yeah, I mean, you're bringing up a good point in terms of it's commonplace to see odds with a large disparity like this, especially when you get more talented fighters taking on challengers that haven't proved to be as talented yet, or just might not be as talented at all compared to their opponents. And for the main card for Bellator, since we're talking about that one, there's only one fight that has close odds. The other ones, the odds are much more of a disparity. And sometimes you run into that problem with these MMA events. At least with the UFC, half the fights had betting value for this weekend. And that doesn't even include the upsets that, obviously I'm going to take. But half the fights have betting value. The odds were much better in these matchups. So if you're looking for betting value or potential long shot picks or upsets, the UFC is much more attractive this week than Bellator is.
Yeah, if it was wrestling, you would just know that the hometown fighters were going to lose, because that's just something that always happens. And even from my recollection, when fighters go to their hometown or their home country or even region, they tend to not really do all that favorably. I just recall the event a couple months ago in Brazil, where I think the Brazilians on the card had a losing record for the night. Tai Tuivasa, who fought in Australia, took on Junior Dos Santos, lost. He had been on a really good run up until that point. So it's not trying to set you up for disappointment, Rick, or saying that you're going to be disappointed. The hometown favorite doesn't always. Anyway, let's move on to NASCAR here. NASCAR's Monster Energy Series in Sparta, Kentucky this week. It's the Quaker State 400. Martin Truex Jr., the betting favorite, plus 325. He's followed by Kyle Busch at plus 450. Kevin Harvick at plus 500. Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, the only other drivers with odds that are shorter than plus 1,000. So, Rick, who do you see taking home the checkered flag this weekend? When we were chatting earlier in the day or yesterday, you had said this one was obvious, clear cut. There was only one choice. So who was that?
Well, I did say this is arguably the easiest race to pick right now, other than maybe Sonoma or Watkins Glen, which are road courses, because then you eliminate 90% of the field. This is the ninth race in Kentucky. So in the previous 8, other than Matt Kenseth, who's retired now, he won one of them. You got Keselowski, who's won 3, Kyle Busch has won 2, and Martin Truex Jr. has won 2. Those 3 guys, obviously you saw, are up in the favorites. One of those 3 guys is going to win this race. All 3 of them have had disappointing races the last couple of weeks, although last week's race was rain shortened, which was terrible because you got some – I'm not even getting that right now. That's actually my whoops of the week. I'll save all that angst and hurt and drama for that section. But for this, I've picked Kyle Busch the last 2 weeks because he obviously was one of the best at some of these tracks. I tell everybody every week, stay away from Kevin Harvick till he actually wins a race. He can compete. He can get in the top 5. He's third in the standings, or at least third or fourth in the driver standings, but he's not winning races. 8 last year, 0 now. He had at least 4 by this point last year, 0 now. Busch and Truex each have 4. Keselowski has 3. They're winning a lot of races. They're coming to a track where all 3 of them have won all the races except for Kenseth. You have to pick one of those 3 guys to win. If you look at them 3, Keselowski's the one who has had the 2 worst finishes in the 30s in both of them, his 2 worst finishes. So he's either winning or he's finishing near the back of the pack. Get rid of him. I'm not a Keselowski fan anyways. So now, once again, and I'm probably sounding like a broken record, and if you read my blogs, you might understand this. It's either Busch or Truex. We're at a track now where I can say this with 100% certainty. Unless there's rain, unless there's a big wreck, which you can say about every single track and every single race, it's either Busch or it's Truex, and they're teammates. Okay? I would say bet on both of them. Split your money in half. That would be the easiest thing to do. I'm a huge Truex fan. I want to see Truex win his 3rd one in a row. But it frustrates me because I picked Busch the last 2 weeks. So I don't want to say Busch for the 3rd week in a row. That's like saying Serena Williams is going to win every tournament. It's frustrating. I want to go with Truex, but he's my favorite, so I'm a little biased about that. I'm torn here. I'm torn. With that said, Busch has a better payout with his odds. I'm going to lean towards Kyle Busch here, even though I want Truex to win.
So, like you said, Truex has won each of his last 2 races here. He's won 4 wins overall. He's won 4 races overall in the year, but he was just 22nd last week. He's finished 17th or worse 5 other times this season. He's not super dominant. He's like super hit or miss, so I don't love that at plus 325. I got a long shot for you here. It's Kurt Busch. Plus 2,500. He's got 4 top 5 finishes on the year, 10 finishes in the top 10. Kyle gets most of the accolades, but Kurt at plus 2,500 is pretty interesting. He's finished at the top 10 in this track 5 times. 4th place in 2016, a 6th place finish last year. It's a 1.5 mile track. He's made the top 10 in 4 of those 6 races at a 1.5 mile track on the season. So if you want a long shot, take Kyle's brother Kurt at plus 2,500.
You just brought up the 1.5 mile track, though. That's where Truex dominates at. That's his distance. He's already won at the 1.5 mile track this season. That's why he's the favorite as well. It's tough. Listen, Kurt Busch 90% of the time is in my betting value section every single week because he has the proven success at a lot of these tracks. You just gave out some good stats in terms of his top 5s and top 10s, not only on the year, but at Kentucky. And he's definitely could be a contender. With that said, though, Kyle Busch, his brother, has been more dominant at this track. And you have to lean towards someone who has the dominance and who is arguably the best driver in the entire sport. And you know what? They have a sibling rivalry. It'd be funny to see Kurt upstage his brother. I would laugh and root for that if that was possible. I just don't see it happening this week.
I agree with the one of you that picked Busch, so that's going to be my pick for the week. K. Busch, if we want to get specific. So I kind of like that. But I have written down the quote, unless there's rain or a big wreck, it's Busch or Truex. So I'm just going to keep that in mind over the weekend, and we'll see what happens.
Asterisk, Keselowski is 3rd, but I don't like Keselowski.
Okay, hold on. Asterisk, Keselowski is 3rd, doesn't like him. All right.
I mean, you can't rule out a guy who's won 3 of the 8 races there.
Well, unless you're going to say it's Busch or Truex.
Unless it's me, because I don't like him. He's got a rat face. I just can't stand him. He's like a little weasel. I feel better now.
What if he said there should be a race in Portland or Sacramento every year? And
I might actually start hoping he, finishes in the top 5 more often, but not win races. Just can't stand him. He's like a little. If you follow this sport for a while, he's a weasel, and he just whines, and he's got a face that you just want to punch. Worse than Bieber. Not as bad as Richie Port, but right close to that.
Shane Bieber.
There you go.
We're getting a little off the rails. So I believe that brings us to the time of the podcast for my favorite segment of the week, where we just call Whoops. Our chance to come clean about something we projected, predicted, or pushed that we were really wrong about, and it gives us a chance to explain ourselves. So I'm going to go first here to get us going. Last week on Betting for the Cycle, the one pick I got wrong so far in that one. There's one that's still pending for the rest of the year, but we did a series pick between the Diamondbacks and the Rockies. It was being played at Chase Field in Phoenix. If you had looked at the pitching matchups, it was very clearly favoring the Diamondbacks. I basically overanalyzed it. I picked the Rockies to win. Not only did they not win the series, they were swept pretty handily, 8-0 in one game and a 1 or 2 run loss in the other ones. So basically it was a case of overanalyzing, which is a good lesson that basically sometimes the obvious answer is the correct answer, because in that case, it very much was. The Arizona Diamondbacks had the pitching matchups favoring them heavily. If you way too far into the details as I did, and you found that the Rockies had a lot of success against Arizona in the previous year, especially in games played in Phoenix, and they did really well, and they had beaten guys like Robbie Ray earlier in the year, it would have led you to the wrong conclusion. So that was my whoops for the week. So, Rick, I think you had teased it a moment ago, but what is your whoops of the week this week?
My whoops for the week, and it's not completely my fault. Okay, let me put that out there. It's Mother Nature's fault. Okay, it is Mother Nature's fault.
This is a Mother Nature whoops for the week.
It's a Mother Nature. It's a mother of mother whoops.
Put this in Mother Nature's whoops column for the week.
There you go. We had, for the first time in, I don't know, I think there was one other time in the last decade where we had a rain-shortened race at Daytona. And so last week, not only did it get rained out on Saturday, then they get moved to Sunday, and then they have a rain delay, and then with 33 laps left in the race, they decided to just call the race because they couldn't, with lightning strikes and the storm doesn't look like it's going to let up. So then you have a winner who doesn't even race in the Monster Energy Series full time. He does like a handful of races in a season. He's more of an Xfinity driver. Justin Haley, who I had to look up to even know who the heck he was because he's irrelevant. He's one of the guys you always see at the end of the ticker when they're showing the positions. He's always at the end, okay? He stayed. Kurt Busch should have won that race, actually. Kurt Busch went in for the pit. If he would have stayed out, he would have stayed in first and then would have won because they ended up calling the race because of the rain. So my whoops is that. I picked Kyle Busch to win it. Kyle Busch had an up-and-down car, but most of the field had an up-and-down car because of the weather. They couldn't get consistently going when you're stopping a race, when you're having to dry the track, when you're having accidents because of the track. Okay, so bottom line is this. It's Mother Nature's fault. It's not mine, but that's my whoops.
Whoopsing Mother Nature. Taylor, who do you want to blame your whoops of the week on this week?
I'll blame it on injury replacements in the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. Max Scherzer was replaced. Sonny Gray replaced him. Josh Hader was replaced. So on our baseball podcast last week, baseball show, I picked the NL to win the All-Star Game, despite the fact that the NL never wins the All-Star Game. They've won it 3 times since 1996, yet somehow I talked myself into, look at their pitching staff with Scherzer and Hader and DeGrom and Kershaw and Buehler and all these guys, and it's like, it never matters. The National League sucks in the All-Star Game. I can't explain it. The American League just reigns supreme. My favorite team's an American League team. You'd think I would just be a homer there, just like I'm a homer with the Rockets in the face of all the other data that says I should not be. But, it's an All-Star Game pick. It's a toss-up, but that'll be my whoops for the week. A very light whoops compared to other whoopses I've had in the past.
Retroactively, I would like to blame my whoops of the week this week on baseballreference.com because it was their website that led me to those numbers, and I was able to overanalyze things to the point that I would have been led to the wrong conclusion. So really, none of us had a whoops this week. It was Mother Nature that was wrong. It was the numbers and that a deep statistical website that was wrong. And who did you blame, Taylor? Who
I blamed All-Star Game injury replacements.
All-Star injuries, yes. So injuries, numbers, and weather. Those were the 3 things that had a whoops this week. And with that, we're going to close the window here. One last chance to get some things in. The closing line set. Looking for some final thoughts. Taylor, what do you got?
So we're enduring the worst sports week of the year. The baseball all-star break is ongoing. There's absolutely nothing happening this week. NBA Summer League is like the main event during the week. You know, the Women's World Cup is over. The Gold Cup is over. All that stuff is over. Last night we had the ESPYs, which is the dumbest thing on TV every single year. You know, the athletes get rewarded with trophies when they win. It makes no sense. So you have best male athlete. It's like Giannis and whoever else. I don't know how they award this. It's like this dude's been the best basketball player, but he's better than the best golfer, Brooks Koepka. And like, okay, well, who decides that? And what's any of this based on? I'm just complaining because there's nothing going on. It's been a boring week. So I'm venting about the ESPYs. But luckily, baseball gets back going today with one whopping game. Back tomorrow, full schedule. So hopefully next week I'm less beaten down, I guess.
Nothing going on this week? Are you serious?
Absolutely nothing on.
Finishing up. NASCAR's coming up.
It's a fringe sport kind of week, I guess.
You got 2 MMA events coming up. You got some big boxing fights this week internationally coming up. And then you have the greatest sporting spectacle in the world. No, not the Super Bowl and not WrestleMania anymore, because that has sucked over the last couple of years. The Tour de France.
Oh, God.
Holy crap. If you guys have not been watching it, you're missing out on compelling television. The best, I always say it every year, it's the best 3 weeks of reality television you'll find anywhere in the world. It is so exciting. Today is the toughest stage of the first week. It's one of the toughest stages that they've had in any first week in decades. You know how I know that? Besides watching it for most of my life. But my homie Lance Armstrong also said it, and his co-host George Hincapie, my 2 favorite cyclists growing up, have said it. Let me just put it to you this way. Oh, I also got to talk about this. Stranger Things. I binge watched it. Great season 3. I crushed my prop bets on that. That's why you guys got to pay attention to this podcast, because once in a while, I'll knock it out of the park. And I knocked it out of the park with Stranger Things. Her nose was a leaky faucet, like I said it would be. Every episode. 7 out of 8 episodes guaranteed. There was one where I kind of thought I saw blood in the other episode. There's only 8 episodes in a season. Her nose was bleeding in at least 7 of them, okay? I told you, everybody, that it's easy money. You have to take that one. Now let me get back to this. The Tour de France, Taylor. The Tour de France is one of the most amazing events in all of sports anywhere in the world. Just what they put themselves through, the competition, the storylines, the tactics, the luck it takes, individual teams. It doesn't matter. Up mountains, down mountains, in the rain, anything. It's an amazing event. I'm so fired up for it. I still got at least 2 more weeks of it. I will be depressed when it ends like I do. I always go through withdrawals after the Tour de France is over with. I get a little down. That's when there's nothing going on. At the end of July, when it's just baseball, the most boring thing outside of golf, it's terrible. Tour de France, everybody. Please follow it. Please watch it. Please check it out.
Issuing one factual correction, the biggest spectacle in sports, I believe, is WrestleMania. So that's kind of the way it goes. I think they technically billed as the biggest spectacle in sports and entertainment, or sports entertainment. Don't remember if they throw in the end or not, but that's kind of the way that goes. So, yeah, if you want to watch cycling, it's a big week for that on the Ocho. And the major sports return this weekend with baseball. Friday, 3-game series galore. Check out the latest edition of Betting for the Cycle for more on this weekend's MLB picks, and a nice long-term pick as well, discussing which team might make a push to the playoffs that's currently not in a playoff position. But for now, let's get into this edition. What's that, Taylor?
Padres.
I like that pick. I told you ahead of time. We had that discussion, and then we got into that. So Padres are an interesting one. I went safe and picked the Red Sox. But the Brewers, only a half game back of the Cubs at the All-Star break for the NL Central lead, so a lot to discuss with that. We're not going to bore Rick too much with it, even though we talked about the Tour de France for about 15 minutes. So let's wrap up this edition of the Odds On Favorites podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Odds On Favorites YouTube channel. And check out gamblingsites.org for plenty more from these guys here. They've been Taylor Smith and Rick Rockwell. I'm Drew Goldfarb. Thanks for watching. See you next time.